Alright, what up? Today we're going to be talking about totalitarianism, how totalitarian ideologies manifest themselves in society previously and currently. Hi, puppies. This is my dog. Today we'll be reading from Hannah Arendt, however you pronounce it, The Origins of Totalitarianism, on chapter 10, titled A Classless Society. The beginning sentence is this: nothing is more characteristic of the totalitarian movements in general, and of the quality of fame of their leaders in particular, than the startling swiftness with which they are forgotten, and then the startling ease with which they can be replaced. I think that's a brilliant point to illustrate exactly what totalitarianism is, because it's exactly what Benito Mussolini had used in order to try to create and enforce his totalitarian sort of regime, even though he wasn't necessarily as successful as, say, Stalin or Hitler. Stalin being the most prevalent, and the most unified aspect of totalitarianism, at least in my opinion. I think he had the most amount of control out of any other, totalitarian sort of system that's ever existed. I'll get to my point, examples of that in a second. But yeah, I mean, totalitarianism utilizes the full, total control of all aspects of life. So social, political, cultural, economic, everything. It's all controlled systematically in a very rigorous, absolute sort of way. So usually it's characterized as like a specific leader, a specific ruler, in order to facilitate and create these sorts of ideas. That can either be a bottom-up system or a top-down system, so the information is being provided, through a top-down system. It would be sort of hierarchical. The great leaders of politicians or monarchies or, aristocratic sort of people who don't necessarily follow the law, but enforce their own specific type of law that they have curated. Those systems are a little bit more unstable. They're more overt in their sort of approach rather than covert. Covert totalitarianism would usually be of a bottom-up system. Coercion, propaganda, mass media propaganda machines, of, assimilations and deteriorations of, say, democracies or republics that eventually turn into those sorts of ideas. Sometimes it can even be a bottom-up and a top-down system at the exact same time. How that usually works is depending on, what level of propaganda is being pushed. If the movement is there's a cultural revolution that is currently happening that would then enforce a type of totalitarian sort of hegemony. You can kind of look at that when it comes to communist China around the 50s and 60s when it came to the Cultural Revolution. Those are aspects of totalitarianism, promoting their own specific type of culture in a Marxian Maoist approach. Another example of that would be, Stalinist Russia when it came to the great purges that he committed, or the gulags. Families having to turn in their own children, or, sons and daughters turning in their own parents because they, weren't advocates of the Communist Party, the specific, vanguard party, or they weren't pulling their weight, or they were hiding food, or they were hiding, correspondence and other people, things like that. kind of the same thing when it came to Hitler, you know, hiding Jews, hiding gypsies, hiding disabled people. You know, why are you hiding them? Schools, entertainment, so movies are heavily controlled. The educational system, like I'd said, schooling, even the specific teachers. I believe there's stories where even children who had been going to, you know, school, like elementary school, middle schools, high schools, universities, even though they had mainly been destroying universities at first, and then utilizing them next. But anyways, my point being is that the children would either talk to, you know, staff or teachers about, hey, my dad is, or, you know, not advocating for the Nazi Party, because it would be enforced and indoctrinated into their psyches and their thought processes at school, that, you know, if you're not doing this, you're immoral, you're against the state, you're against, you know, your neighbor, your brother, your sister, and that's the right thing to do. It was the same thing that Stalin had issued, and Benito Mussolini to a lesser degree, because it was more of threats rather than anything, at least, you know, early on. And then, of course, it would be accelerated by Hitler's viewpoints that he had taken. Of course, you know, he would still write, Mussolini, would write that fascism is totalitarianism, that it has to be the absolute rule of the state and everything made through by the state. So, with that being said, what other aspects? Censorship, full-blown censorship. You know, it can only be the ideas that are curated by the state, you know, specifically. So, if it's a couple of people who are saying, you know, say like Joseph Goebbels, or, you know, Himmler, or, you know, Hitler himself, those are the elite. Those are the, you know, the few that, you know what's going on, that have the authority, so to speak, to be able to provide you with these sorts of heinous, ridiculous laws that are naturally anti-rational. They're anti-reason. They promote a mythical sort of underpinning where you must destroy your own logic. You must destroy your own sort of identity as an individual. I had said about that in my first video on fascism, where the individual literally means nothing. You are a mere byproduct when it comes to the formation of the state, so to speak. That's why when it came to, like, you know, Japan, or it's often been debated about whether or not they had, you know, like proto-fascism in their country, I would say more than likely yes, considering their anti-rationalism, their ultra-nationalism, their, you know, need for struggle, and the romanticization that they had when it came to death. You know, you could see that with the kamikazes. You can see that with, you know, their honor, harakiri, of, you know, murdering yourself and not letting the United States imprison you or something, you know, holding a bomb into your hand and, you know, taking out as many people as you can with you. That would bring honor and courage and respect in those specific cultures. It would be a very similar story when it came to Hitler and Benito Mussolini and Stalin. If you came back alive and you were a prisoner, or, you know, you had lost, then you had brought in disgrace. You were as good as dead. You were worthless in their eyes. You know, and you died for a cause that didn't care about you. You died for a warmongering, militaristic, selfish, narcissistic cult, you know, a hegemony, a disgusting, vile, wretched nation. that is no nation at all. A nation that deeply believes that it is superior and better than other pre-existing nations simply because, I don't know, I don't even know for what good reason, rather than it just being mystical, it being anti-rational, it being, the hope that you can eventually develop your nation in such a specific way to relive some glory days that don't even exist. And I think the way that you get there is mainly by desperation of its own people. If you look at it with Hitler's Nazi Germany, or you look at it with like Benito Mussolini's Italian fascism, or you look at it with, Stalinist Russia, you'll see a common thread of desperation for its people. And the desperation then promotes anger, promotes savagery, bitterness, barbarity, and a need to control, a need to try to control the outcome because you've been so helpless for so long. And your nation has been deteriorating in such a way. When it came to, Italy, sorry, I had something stuck in my teeth. When it comes to Italy, you had the feeling of not getting enough resources when it came to the end of World War I. They had a tanked, destroyed economy. Most of the provinces that they conquered, it wasn't for anything, and they were promised, more land than they were given. Their economy suffered. They spent millions and millions of dollars on military budget, and had received basically nothing for it. Germany was, had destruction when it came to the Treaty of Versailles after the First World War, and were met with either indifference or straight up revenge seeking. And I guess to a certain extent that is justifiable, but then to a certain extent it isn't, let alone with the 100,000 troops or the limited aircraft, the sanctions that were put on them, the multiple colonies that were taken, stripped away from them, that were, money makers for them. And then unemployment skyrocketed, the GDP and value of their dollar was ultimately disintegrated. I think it would cost at one point it was like 24 million marks or something like that for a loaf of bread. And it would be better to, burn your money for the house fire and to keep yourself warm than it was to actually buy or sell anything with marks. And then of course they had to, the government had to create a new system through, I think it was like a gold system, the Dewey Act or something like that. I can't exactly remember. So it became that, and it was a gold standard. But even that was through, the United States, and buying back loans and things like that. And then that would ultimately result in, some form of anger or frustration. Hitler, of course, turning it on to the Jews, saying that they were the ones who had sentenced us to war. And of course, there's way more history when it comes to that, but I think the ultimate outlier is some form of populism, some form of you have been wronged, you have been taken advantage of, here is your solution. Let's kill the communists, let's kill the socialists, let's kill the Jews and the gypsies, let's kill all these people, let's go back to maybe a prehistoric era, maybe a more fond period that had built-in created aesthetics like that of, Greco-Roman mythology and societies, maybe like that of Sparta, maybe like that of Rome when it came to militarism and, the idealistic form of a person. Maybe go back to a specific type of religion. Maybe go back to a specific type of idea. The strong oppressing the weak, the Charles Darwin, the social Darwinian theory, the strong consume the weak, the natural selection. Some people are just inherently better than others, those sorts of ideas. So, and if you can have the majority believe that, then they'll follow you. And if you indoctrinate them early on, keep them koshered, keep them contained, conformed into maybe a specific type of comfort, a specific type of narrative, a specific type of ideological system that they will then pass on to their children, and then it will go on for generations and generations, and no one will even dare to think. Because if anyone does think, then they will be ostracized. They will be, further destroyed, or, maybe even assimilated back into the culture that they had tried so hard to get out of, like that of 1984. When it comes to Big Brother, or even Winston wasn't necessarily out of the indoctrination that he had so desperately wanted to escape from, and that's what it leaves you, is where's the right side of history? Where's the answers? Where can I find these answers? And most of the time you won't find them. It takes a long time to think about these things and digest it. I mean, I know I have. I've had to think about these things for a good couple of years, and I would still consider myself to be sort of indoctrinated into the system. I still deal with things. I play video games. I look at way too much TikTok, screen time, Instagram, YouTube, all of these things. And they warp your mind. They, simple as that. They keep you into the system. They keep you into the, if you want to say matrix, whatever. I don't know, I think that's a little corny, but it's the same thing. It keeps you plugged into the narrative that they want to pursue and provide for you, whether or not it's the United States, whether or not it's Great Britain, any country has its own specific ideological system that it is following, and it wants you to believe specifically that its nation is on the right side of history, because how could you then move forward as a specific sort of nation if you don't believe inherently that your nation is worth fighting for? And then that can be taken to a very extreme way, because there's a difference between patriotism and having pride in some sense to your country, and what it means to be an American, or what it means to be a Brit, what it means to be an Irishman, or any type of group, what it means to be German, what it means to be Portuguese, what it means to be Mexican, what if you just follow specifically within the historical landscape of your culture and your given nation, then most of the time your nation will have blood on its hands. Point blank. Your nation will have blood on its hands. It has done terrible things. The United States has done awful things. Most of Europe, the Middle East, Latin America, every country is guilty. Every country has done something. Some countries are more guilty than others, at least in recent years. And we all make excuses for how it happens, why specific countries are worse than others, or why specific countries are better than others, or why our culture is better than other cultures because we have a constitutional republic, yet we don't act like we do, yet we don't follow it. Yet we have millions and millions of homeless veterans, and they are about 80%, I think, of the homeless population. We don't take care of our people. It's becoming illegal to even be a homeless person. We have more housing and real estate than there are people who are actually able to even afford or buy these houses. Yet we are the richest most prosperous nation in the entire world. And none of these people are living the American dream. And the people that do live the American dream are the ones that have created monopolistic businesses that destroy millions and millions of people's lives. But, you know, that's our culture. That is most of the European society. Other countries have, you know, theocratic religions. Of course, they're flawed. We're all flawed. We all have this flawed sort of nature with us, but it's whether or not we can learn from our ignorance or learn from our arrogance to actually move forward or do something different. And most of the time, nations decide not to do anything different. They think that they are completely fine. They think that they are on the right side of history and nothing actually improves. Nothing changes. So even after totalitarian sort of rules, even after Stalinist Russia, you have Putin, who goes after Ukraine, who wants to reestablish the USSR, when people believe deeply that the USSR was better than what is currently being created within Russia. You still have millions and millions of people who talk about it, talk about the glory days of Russia, of the USSR. You have millions of people talk about the glory days of Italy or the First Reich in Germany, when they had single-handedly destroyed the Roman Empire, and that they'll be able to bring in this new Augustan era of militarism and security and safety. It's all bullshit. It's nothing. It means nothing. So, same could be applied to the United States. When it comes to Trump talking about the Gilded Age and, you know, this sort of Red Scare propaganda that he loves to pull when it comes to the, you know, the Marxists, the neocons, the radical left that is destroying and, you know, cancer spreading of our own society. I don't know. I don't know. I think that's all I want to say about that. But sorry for the rant, but I don't know. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.